Caleb Turner stood near the broken fence of his ranch, staring across the snow-covered land that had once been his pride. The Colorado winter was unforgiving, and so was life. Each breath of cold air reminded him of unpaid debts, sick cattle, and the silence that followed him home every night. The ranch had been in his family for generations, but now it felt like it was slipping through his fingers. Banks were losing patience, neighbors whispered about foreclosure, and Caleb was running out of options. Christmas was only weeks away, yet there was no joy in the season for him. No lights decorated his small farmhouse, no laughter echoed through the halls. Loneliness pressed on him harder than the cold. In a moment of desperation, fueled by a newspaper advertisement and a late-night decision, Caleb had arranged for a mail-order bride. It felt strange, almost shameful, but he told himself it was practical. He needed a partner, someone to help manage the household, and maybe, just maybe, bring a little warmth back into his life. On a gray December morning, Caleb waited at the small train station in town. Steam rose from the tracks as the train slowed, its whistle cutting through the icy air. His hands were stuffed into his coat pockets, his shoulders tense. He had no idea what kind of woman would step off that train. His expectations were low. He imagined a fragile city woman who would regret her decision the moment she saw the harsh ranch life awaiting her. Then he saw her. Emily Wright stepped down from the train with a single suitcase in her hand. She was modestly dressed, wrapped in a thick coat, her dark hair neatly pinned back. Her face held a calm expression, and her eyes scanned the platform with quiet curiosity rather than fear. When her gaze met Caleb's, she smiled, not nervously, but with steady confidence. "You must be Caleb Turner," she said, extending her hand. Her voice was gentle, yet sure. Caleb nodded, surprised by her composure. As they rode back to the ranch in silence, he studied her from the corner of his eye. She didn't complain about the cold or the long ride. Instead, she asked thoughtful questions about the land, the animals, and the weather. It puzzled him. Most people avoided ranch talk unless they had lived it. When they finally arrived, Emily stepped out of the wagon and took in the sight of the worn-down barns and tired cattle. Caleb waited for disappointment to cross her face, but it never came. Instead, she breathed in deeply, as if grounding herself. "It's beautiful," she said softly. Caleb almost laughed. Beautiful was not the word he would have used. To him, it was a place full of problems and pressure. Still, something about Emily's calm presence unsettled him, in a good way. As snow began to fall around them, Caleb had no idea that this quiet woman carried more than just a suitcase with her. She carried a hidden strength that would soon change everything. The first morning Emily spent at the ranch began before sunrise. Caleb awoke to the sound of movement in the kitchen, something he wasn't used to hearing. For years, his mornings had been quiet, too quiet. When he stepped inside, he found Emily already awake, carefully pouring coffee and setting out a simple breakfast. She greeted him with a warm smile, as if she had always belonged there. After breakfast, Caleb expected her to stay inside, adjusting to the cold and the unfamiliar surroundings. Instead, she pulled on sturdy boots and followed him outside. The wind was sharp, and snow crunched beneath their feet as they walked toward the barn. Emily watched the cattle closely, her eyes narrowing slightly in concern. "They look underfed," she said gently. "And that one is limping." Caleb stopped short. Most people wouldn't have noticed, or they would have kept their opinions to themselves. He shrugged. "Winter's been hard. Feed costs money I don't have." Emily nodded, not judging him. As the day went on, she continued to ask quiet but precise questions, about grazing patterns, water sources, and the animal's health. Her curiosity didn't feel intrusive. It felt knowledgeable. Later that afternoon, Caleb found her kneeling beside an old chestnut horse in the far stall. The horse had been ill for weeks, refusing food and barely standing. Caleb had already accepted that he might lose it. Emily spoke softly to the animal, her hands gentle but confident as she examined its legs and gums. "My father was a veterinarian," she said without looking up. "He taught me how to care for animals when I was young. I helped him for years." Caleb stared at her, stunned. She explained how the horse was suffering from a treatable infection and showed him which herbs and supplies they could use until a proper doctor could be afforded. By evening, the horse was standing more steadily, its breathing calmer. It wasn't a miracle, but it was hope, and hope had been absent from the ranch for far too long. Over the next few days, Emily's presence quietly transformed the rhythm of the ranch. She reorganized the pantry to stretch supplies, repaired torn blankets, and suggested small changes that made a surprising difference. She rose early and worked late, never complaining. At night, as snow fell outside the windows, she listened as Caleb spoke about his fears, the debts, the pressure, the shame of possibly losing his family's land. She didn't offer false promises. Instead, she offered plans. "We can fix this," she said calmly. Step by step, Christmas drew closer, and for the first time in years, Caleb felt something shift inside him. The ranch still struggled, but it no longer felt hopeless. Emily wasn't just helping with chores, she was restoring order, purpose, and belief. Caleb began to realize he had been wrong about her from the start. Emily was not a burden or a desperate choice. She was capable, intelligent, and stronger than anyone he had ever known. And though neither of them spoke of love yet, something far deeper than obligation was beginning to take root between them, something built on trust, resilience, and quiet understanding. As the days passed, the changes Emily brought to the ranch became impossible to ignore. What had once felt like a place on the edge of collapse slowly began to breathe again. Emily convinced Caleb to rotate the grazing fields, allowing the land time to recover. She mixed affordable but nutritious feed, using techniques her father had taught her, and the cattle began to regain strength. Even the weakest calves showed signs of improvement. For the first time in months, Caleb felt as though his efforts were finally moving in the right direction. Word of the improvements spread beyond the Turner Ranch. Neighboring ranchers, curious and skeptical, began stopping by. Some came under the pretense of borrowing tools, others with genuine concern. They were surprised to see Emily confidently inspecting animals, offering advice, and explaining solutions with quiet authority. At first, Caleb worried they would judge him for relying on his mail-order bride, but instead, they respected her knowledge. Slowly, the whispers about failure were replaced with murmurs of admiration. One cold afternoon, a neighboring rancher arrived in panic. His prize cow was seriously ill, and no veterinarian could reach the area due to heavy snow. Emily didn't hesitate. She gathered her supplies and rode out with Caleb, working carefully despite the bitter wind. After hours of effort, the cow stabilized. The grateful rancher pressed money into Caleb's hand, insisting he accept it. It wasn't much, but it was the first unexpected income Caleb had received in a long time. More importantly, it restored his confidence. That evening, as Christmas Eve approached, Emily suggested something that caught Caleb off guard. She wanted to prepare care packages for struggling families nearby, medicine, warm clothing, and preserved food. Caleb hesitated, thinking of his own limited resources, but Emily reminded him that hardship was shared, and kindness often returned in ways money could not. Together, they worked late into the night, packing what little they could spare. When they delivered the packages, the gratitude in the children's eyes left Caleb speechless. He realized that Emily saw the ranch not just as a business, but as part of a larger community. Her compassion reached far beyond survival, it was about responsibility and heart. Later that night, they sat by the fireplace, the crackling flames filling the room with warmth. Caleb finally spoke the truth he had been holding back. "I thought this marriage was just a contract," he admitted. "I didn't expect any of this." Emily smiled softly. "Neither did I. But sometimes the hardest choices lead us exactly where we're meant to be." Caleb looked at her then, not as a solution to his problems, but as a partner. The ranch was healing, and so was he. What began as a desperate decision was becoming something meaningful. With Christmas only hours away, Caleb knew one thing for certain: the ranch's future was no longer his burden alone. Christmas morning arrived wrapped in silence and soft white snow. The ranch looked different now, not just cleaner or better managed, but alive. The cattle moved calmly in the fields, their breath rising in steady clouds, and the barns stood firm against the winter wind. Caleb stepped outside as the sun crept over the hills, its pale light reflecting off the frozen ground. For the first time in years, he felt something close to peace. Emily joined him, pulling her coat tighter as she smiled at the quiet beauty around them. Together, they walked through the ranch, checking on the animals. The once sick horse lifted its head and nickered softly, strong and alert. Caleb felt a lump rise in his throat. That horse had been a symbol of everything he thought he was losing, and now it stood as proof that things could be saved. Inside the farmhouse, Emily had decorated a small pine branch with ribbon and twine, turning it into a simple Christmas tree. It wasn't extravagant, but it felt perfect. They shared a modest meal, laughing easily, the awkward distance between them completely gone. The warmth between them felt natural, earned through long days of work and shared struggles. As the morning wore on, neighbors arrived, some with gifts of food, others with supplies or simple notes of thanks. Caleb was stunned. The kindness Emily had shown the community had come back to the ranch, multiplied. Standing among them, Caleb realized he was no longer seen as a failing rancher, but as part of a supportive network. Emily had given him more than knowledge, she had given him belonging. Later, when the visitors had gone and the sky began to darken, Caleb and Emily stood together near the fence where everything had once felt broken. Snowflakes drifted slowly around them. Caleb took a deep breath and reached for Emily's hand. "I asked for a wife because I was afraid of losing everything," he said honestly. "But what I gained was far more than I ever deserved." Emily squeezed his hand, her eyes shining. "I didn't come here just to survive," she replied. "I came here to build something real." Caleb knew then that this was no longer a marriage of necessity. It was a partnership rooted in respect, trust, and love that had grown quietly but deeply. The ranch was no longer just land and livestock, it was home. As night fell and stars filled the sky, they stood together, imagining the future. There would still be hard seasons, still challenges ahead, but they would face them side by side. Emily's hidden talent had saved the ranch, but her courage and kindness had saved Caleb's heart. That Christmas, the mail-order bride was no longer a stranger who arrived by train. She was the reason the ranch endured, and the reason Caleb believed in tomorrow again.